can all hear me. I'm not sure how many of you know Deb Brownyard. She's just such a force in the state in dispute resolution, and currently she's the Director of Office Dispute Resolution in the State Court Administrator's Office, which is part of the Nebraska Supreme Court. And as part of that job, what she does is she is the one who, at the beginning of every year, reviews and handles the grant processing, and she's just a tremendous program and resource support to the mediation centers across the state of Nebraska. And you should know that Deb has had a very interesting and big impact on the state as a whole and how we all got to where we are today. You know, she started in 1992 actively mediating in child family welfare cases, and she's done a tremendous amount also in multiple jurisdiction type public policy issues. So she really has spanned all of mediation. She also has written a lot of the curriculum we use right now for restorative justice and for family and basic mediation training, and she also actively still does a lot of that training. So some people are still very lucky they get it. And also, she was the founding director of the Nebraska Justice Center, which is one of the 6 mediation centers across the state. And she did that until 2007 when she moved to Lincoln. That's right, until you moved to Lincoln. So, without further ado.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm happy to say Nebraska Justice Center is in wonderful hands with Jane Martin. And we're so grateful that Jane's a part of this system as we're going forward. I think it would help if I turn that on. Well, Kelly Hoffman suggested that having a forum on the acronyms of ADR might be useful as we try to sort the beans and figure out what something is and what it isn't. And just a little caveat before we go forward, a rose is a rose is a rose, but when you think of a rose, there's tons of different kinds of roses. So we will kind of give you some broad, sweep definitions, and as much as possible we try to stay faithful internally in the state, fidelity to the process that we've learned here in the state of Nebraska. And at the same time, if you go to other states, if somebody calls something a family group conference, it may or may not look like what you've seen here in the state. This PowerPoint is available in your packets. And so part of, in addition to acronyms, is the question of why do we use and consider ADR in the child welfare process. And as a lawyer who practiced juvenile law in Lincoln for several years, and I was a parents attorney, I was a guardian ad litem. I also worked at HHS and did a lot of child welfare work, especially with tribal work. I asked myself the question, how do we in the justice system help or hinder outcomes that we're trying to achieve for the children? How does the justice system, the family system, child welfare provider system? So as my social work friends kind of taught me to speak, they talk about the macro and the micro. So what is it about the macro systems that help us or hinder us in achieving the goals of permanency, safety, and well-being for children? And what is it in the micro level that we do on a case-by-case basis that can help or hinder? And which processes enhance the potential for individual change or reinforce resistance or apathy to change? And I will posit that I believe a lot of the attributes of the formal justice system, the adversarial system, reinforce, if not resistance, apathy. It's like, I'm powerless, they're going to do it to me anyway, so why should I even try? And I saw that in some of the cases that I worked on. So in my mind, if what we're trying to accomplish is some kind of positive change in the family system for the children, then shouldn't the child welfare system, the legal system, have mechanisms to move that forward? And I would say yes, and that's why I immediately jumped into the opportunity to pilot family conferencing, for example, in the state several years ago. I don't know who Dr. Robert Anthony is, but I got this slide from another presenter, and you know, you have the name doctor and it sounds official, but the message, most of the time we don't communicate, we just take turns talking. And isn't that kind of what happens in the formal justice system? So to me, communication is one of the keys to change. In order for me to change, I need to understand the why and the how. And how do I understand that is through some kind of communication. So why collaborative processes? First and foremost is because they engender and facilitate communication at their best. And their very structure is one to support communication. Obviously, it increases family voice. And I like the example of if someone told you what you need to do tonight and you have to do it, and sorry, there's no way around it, versus if someone had a conversation with you and talked about, well, this is what I need from you tonight, this is what do you have on your agenda tonight, then we're much more likely to engage in behavior if we've had an opportunity to enter into that dialogue. And part of what I've seen, and as I studied in child welfare, a lot of the families we work with kind of act with an external locus of control. They still need the parent to tell them, you need to do this. And what we're trying to do is help them have more of an internal locus of control, that it's self-motivating. And so part of this collaborative process engenders that movement of putting the accountability back on the parents, of the family members, to make decisions and change. Increases buy-in, decreases resistance and apathy, increases understanding, decreases time in the system, decreases the silo approach to problem solving. When I was at HHS back in the late 80s, one of the things that was brought forward was this unique idea that, wow, maybe we should have the guardians ad litem and the child welfare workers and the parents' attorneys and the therapists all come together and talk about the family at one setting. Surprise! And this was called family coordination, and that was the late 80s. Who was missing? Well, family members. They weren't there. But at least it was going in the right direction. So the whole idea of a collaborative approach means identifying who are the stakeholders, who is going to be affected by the outcome, and so therefore who should be at the table. So alternative dispute resolution is a broad name, ADR, that we'll hear, and it was coined primarily in the legal system. And you may know this, that the juvenile court and its structure and functioning was an early alternative dispute resolution process. It was one of the first that veered from the traditional plaintiff-defendant adversarial nature. The whole jurisdiction of the juvenile judge was much more collaborative, because we're not here to settle a past dispute, we're here to talk about the future of this child. And so I really like to remind ourselves of that we're already in, as I mentioned earlier, a macro system that has already gone through some positive changes to help move things forward. So these acronyms are examples of additional approaches that can be embedded in the life of a case of a child. Pre-hearing conference, PHC. FTM Family Team Meeting, FGC Family Group Conferencing, also known as FDGM Family Group Decision Making, EFGC Expedited Family Group Conference, CDM Child Dependency Mediation. That list is not exhaustive, but it is kind of exhausting to look at. And it, you know, for someone who's not in it, it feels like alphabet soup, and I realize that. And that's why the mediation centers, myself and all of my colleagues, we've immersed ourselves in these processes and learned them, had education, have worked on them, and so we can assist all of the members of the child welfare system and the families to understand what would be useful, why, when. But I'm going to go over a few of these in a little bit more detail throughout the slides. Just want to point out that my office, Office of Dispute Resolution with Administrative Office of Courts, tracks some of these collaborative processes by case type. So I should say by process type. So we've had family group conferencing, which is what I would call the most involved collaborative process for the most complex cases on one end of the spectrum, and then pre-hearing conference, which is probably the most strategic in and out, quick process. And has anyone here ever participated in a family group conference? If so, raise your hand. Okay. How about anyone here participated in a pre-hearing conference? Raise your hand. Pre-hearing conference is fairly new in Nebraska, and you can see by the cases that it was pretty steady from 03-04 up until this past year, when there was about 150 pre-hearing conferences in the state, and that was because it was a pilot project in Douglas County, and Judge Johnson started it off, and it's been adopted by most of the other judges in Douglas County. It was piloted as a initial removal when the children were removed from the home, and the first detention hearing happened, 3 to 7 days later. That there'd be prior to the 10 a.m. court hearing, there'd be a 9 a.m. facilitated conference with the parents attorneys, guardian ad litem, child welfare investigators, county attorney, who would all be there for maybe 45 minutes to address some key questions about the removal of the children. Are there other relatives that might be able to provide a place for the child? Are there some services that the parents might be willing to accept immediately? Does the Indian Child Welfare Act apply? What might be a visitation or a contact plan between the parents and the children and the siblings? Those are some of the key questions, very quick, and as part of that front loading of the process that, according to some of the early research from Vicki Weiss, is that when you have a pre-hearing conference, you've cut the time to adjudication in half, is some of their early results. So instead of adjudication in 70 days, it's 35 days. And those pre-hearing conferences are performed by generally a facilitator, often with the mediation center, and sometimes from some of the local colleagues. The family group conference at the other end of the spectrum is that model based on the Maori tradition of pulling in not only the mom and the dad, but the extended family members and the children and the other professionals involved in the case, doing 10 to 30 hours of one-on-one dialogue and preparation, and then bringing the parties together for a half-day conference in which the coordinator goes over with a large group, what are the strengths of this family? What are the concerns? What are the critical issues that need to be addressed for the child's safety and permanency and well-being? And then there's that private family time where all the professionals, including the facilitator, leaves the room. And when I first heard that that was part of the approach, I thought, how can I leave the room? They need me. I'm the mediator. I'm the facilitator. They're in conflict. Are you kidding? Mom's side of the family hates dad's side of the family. They can't stand to even be in the same room, even though they are coming to this conference. And I could see them at the first session, how they were shooting daggers at each other. But yet, when you think about it, when we as professionals leave the room and this group of 5 to 15 family members are in there by themselves and they know the topics that they need to address, such as clean house, alcohol issue, supervision, they have a task. If those 5 to 15 people can't figure it out among themselves as a family, then that tells me and it tells the system there needs to be additional safety measures put in there. But if they can, then that shows that there's resilience and support for these children by a wider network of natural family caregivers. And then the last part of the session is where the facilitator assists the parties to reality test the family's plan. Is it going to work? Do you have all the details? And we have seen some phenomenal plans where one in which the father was accused of sexually abusing the stepdaughter, and he was out of the house. They did criminal case. He was found not guilty, but there was still that suspicion there. The father was there with his parents, his sister, his brother. The mom was there with her mother, her 2 sisters, and an uncle. And by the end of the session, the sister of the dad and the sister of the mom were the spokespersons for the family. And they came up with a plan, which included supervised time between the dad and the other children, not the stepdaughter. She was not going to be involved with the stepdad. And came up with a plan that was workable, and the caseworker signed off on it. Without this collaborative process, I have a feeling they would have been in the system for a lot longer. And you can see the numbers of cases in family group conference that have happened over the last several years. Many of you might have been aware with the privatization that's going on in the state that the family group conference contract is being terminated at the end of this year with the mediation centers. However, it's still there's still a need for this spectrum of approaches to be used. So I foresee that other resources will be found to keep family group conferencing as one of the menu of collaborative processes for child welfare. It may not be immediately, but it's not going to go away. In the short term, there are still resources to do pre-hearing conferences and some of the other mediations that we'll look at in a minute. Yeah, sure, question.
Back to the number of referrals for each of those centers. Those referrals came from what source?
Most of the family group conferencing referrals in the early years were through HHS, and in the later years there was a blend with court referred. And in some jurisdictions it's primarily court referred.
And why do you think there's 0 for the adoptions? I see that family group conferencing process being vital to some adoption cases.
I think the emphasis was on the front end of the process. And I would agree that adoption, termination of parental rights, there has been FGCs used in there. And it may be that some of the coding was such that even though if it was a TPR facilitation, it might have been coded as neglected use. Any other questions at this point? Yes.
The notion of pre-written conference before the first book program.
Yes.
Is there ever any other time in the process, for instance, if the permanency plan, like Plan B, needs to come into effect, maybe changed, can this facilitation come into play later on, or does it have to?
Yeah. The question is, can a pre-hearing conference, which is generally less than an hour, generally immediately prior to the court hearing, be employed at other points in the case process? And the answer is yes. And the caveat would be is that at future points in the process, the case is already more complex. The issues are more critical. The 12-month review, there's going to be a workshop tomorrow morning on using a pre-hearing conference at the 12-month permanency review. But that's where when I talked about a rose is a rose is a rose, the word, I'm trying to suggest that instead of calling the 12-month permanency review session a pre-hearing conference, because to me that means it's short, it's brief, that these really need to be more like a couple of hours. And can you imagine if you're doing a 12-month permanency review, don't we want the parties to really wrestle with those crossroad questions at that stage of reunification versus permanency, other permanency? They need to wrestle with that before next week when the 12-month review is. So we're suggesting, hold this facilitated meeting or mediation 6 weeks prior. And Judge Gendler in Sarpy County came to us a couple weeks ago and was just really fired up about that idea. And so, and I know Judge Rowland in Sydney is using this as well. And that's where, I'm not sure how Judge Rowland is doing it, but Judge Gendler is anticipating that he himself will actually issue an order to all the parties that a permanency review, mediation, or facilitation is being scheduled for such and such a date. And so that way the parties will participate and it'll be more apt to be successful. And again, those would be held, they anticipate 1 to 3 hours of a session because it's much more significant. And the other key piece on this 12-month review or later on is that the mediator facilitator will do prep work. They will talk to the parties, the parents ahead of time. They will talk to the attorneys, guardian ad litem ahead of time, doing a little prep work to make sure that the time spent is done expeditiously. In the removal case, there's no prep work and there's no follow-up. So those are significant differences. I also want to note, are there any agency staff here, HHS or private provider? Some of the collaborative processes have been also implemented by agency and I'm sure private providers as well. They might call them family team meetings. And those are collaborative processes where once a month, for example, the family will come together for a family team meeting, oftentimes facilitated by the case manager. And the whole idea is to be a more collaborative approach. Those are what I would call insider facilitations. They're performed by people inside the agency. And that's relevant and good as just a general practice. And at the same time, there are critical points or conflict issues where you want to have an outsider facilitator, facilitate that meeting so the agency or provider can have a voice at the table and don't have to wear two hats. I love this continuum. This is from the American Humane Association Family Group Decision-Making Unit. How many here are familiar with American Humane Association? Raise your hand. If you haven't looked at their website before, I would highly encourage you to do that. They're the group that works with both children and animals. They were the group that originally got into the protection and safety of children because there was the ASPCA for stray dogs and cats, but not children back in the 1800s. And so American Humane Association has been the national and international think tank and research resource for family group decision making. They put together this really nice thought piece about family involvement continuum, and on the right is where the system voice is the strongest in decision making in the child welfare case, and on the left is where the family voice is the strongest. On the far right, families are not included in meetings or other forums where decisions are made about children. Does that happen? In the child welfare case, do professionals get together and make decisions about the children without the families there? Yeah, pretty regular. Less than it used to be, but pretty regular. The next to the left, families are present at meetings where decisions will be made about the children. Okay, I'm having a family team meeting and the mom's there. Good, she's there. Next one over, families have a genuine voice at the meetings. Their ideas, needs, perspectives, and other inputs are sought at the meetings, but decision-making rests with the professionals. So that's where you call this is an input. Families are there, they're genuinely encouraged to talk. They feel like they're genuinely encouraged to communicate. They feel like they're being respected and helpful information comes forward. For example, at the pre-hearing conference, families are asked for genuine information. Do you have other relatives that could care for the children? Is there any other needs that your child has? Oh yes, my child has to be on a ventilator every day. Oh, we didn't know that. So, but then the decision-making still rests with professionals. Next, families are part of the decision-making team. In these instances, families partner with professionals to create consensus decisions. That's like a mediation or facilitation. They're part of the team. They help create consensual decisions. Now this is the part that's, I think, hard for me, as a lawyer and a mediator to get my head wrapped around on, but philosophically I really love it. I'm not sure how we as a system can truly make it happen, which is families along with their support network craft the initial plans that are subsequently shared with professionals who work collaboratively with the family to ensure it's attainable and meets the highest standards for safety, permanency, and well-being. The best family group conference does that, where it's the families who are crafting their plan. So it really turns our system upside down. And I just want you, if you don't remember anything else from today, just think about that. What would it look like if it was turned upside down and somehow we were able to provide the network and supports for families to craft their own plans? Anyone have the time? 10 to noon, we go to 12:15. So I have some case studies I want you to look at in just a minute. So, all right. I've already kind of defined a little bit about pre-hearing conference, brief, limited meeting, usually immediately prior to the court hearing, independent facilitator, parents and other stakeholders present. Family team meeting, usually held within the agencies. Family group conference, that's that long preparation. Family, what is it that you need? In some of the Maori models, the family group conference happens at the family's community worship location. And in the videos I saw, the family conference, the way the Maoris come together, there's big cushions on the floor. Everybody comes in, takes their shoes off. They sit on the big cushions on the floor. They have a special prayer and song in their traditional language to start the circle. So it's truly a family-centered family process, and it's not just the bio mom or just the bio dad. It's the aunts and uncles and cousins. I think that is an essential key. Child dependency mediation, specific issue related. Foster parent and mom don't get along. It's breaking down their process for the child. Do a mediation on that topic just between the mom and the foster parent. It's more of a strategic in and out to overcome a conflict that's a barrier for progress. Pre-hearing conference, this is all about how to integrate within the system. Family group conference is usually scheduled either as a voluntary pre-filing. I've done a few that were, I got a call from HHS who said, we haven't filed on this family yet, but we really think a family group conference would be helpful. And it was. And it kept the children out of the system. In British Columbia, they have a statute that says you can basically, if you identify that there's a child in need, that they might do a filing on the child, yet that filing might be dismissed after 3 or 6 months if they go through the family group conference process and they successfully are able to remedy whatever the problem is. So again, that's a system solution that we might think about. Child dependency mediation can be scheduled any time in the case process. So I just would ask the question, where on the continuum of family voice and system voice and decision making are these different processes and the lack thereof? Okay, any questions so far? Yes.
Just how you were saying the family group conference procedure is sort of a pre-filing or a possibility that the filing could be dismissed if somebody successfully participated in that. What kind of situations would that be appropriate for? It just seems that, I mean, the cases that I hear, children are removed. So usually there's a safety determination that drugs or alcohol or something is, going on that needs to be addressed, and there really isn't this kind of process available, or it seems like the state doesn't sort of approach it from that view. And I'm wondering if there are situations where that you would think that it would be appropriate or less appropriate.
Family group conferencing?
Well, in the model that you described there, which is sort of the to deal with the issues.
What
up
kinds
front.
of issues would be best used in a voluntary versus?
I mean, I presume that it would be appropriate at different stages of the case as well, but
Right.
in the sort of like as an initial, avoiding the full, and litigation of some sort or another.
Well, I think it's more of an agency or an HHS or provider call, because I think they need to do some initial safety assessment, and so I would imagine it would be those cases that there's those supports that are already there. And the one I'm thinking of, the child was about 8 years old, the stepmother and the father had a new baby, and apparently there was some emotional and mental abuse that the stepmother was focusing on the stepchild, and somehow that got to the attention of the family, of the HHS, and So the child wasn't physically or, wasn't neglected or that kind of abuse, but they could tell there was some risk there. And so that's the one that they did a voluntary on. But again, I think it's more of an HHS or agency assessment. What I'm going to do is hand out a one-pager that has 3 scenarios on it. And I'd like for you to get into groups of 3 or 4 and see what you think which ATR process might be useful in these scenarios. And there's a couple of other questions. Who would participate in the process? What issues do you think should be addressed? When should it be scheduled? Who might refer the case? And I'd like for each of the groups to kind of just jot down your ideas, and then we'll kind of share afterwards. I'll give you about 5 to 8 minutes to do that. And so please stay where you are, but kind of find 2 or 3 people around you to join up with.
Apparently missed out on it.
Well, I'm not going to get you a sheet that during the
Coming at very different angles and interesting to see. We're all Oh, I think we want charts. Okay. I just don't see that. I don't know that that's true. I just do administration and basically can't find.
We get to sign one.
Which process we follow. If any. She's talking about FGCs. Child dependency management. So there's several ABRs. One of them. Either the T or Sure.
Yes.
Are we going to have to do a report again?
I'd like some comments.
Okay.
We're supposed to get on 3 now.
We have
I was thinking maybe this.
What are the issues? Yeah, and I think you could do an FGC.
I was thinking of family team meetings. Just address their issues.
I was thinking, the reason I was thinking family group conference was because they're in foster care. Mom seems to need some support. It doesn't seem to say, if they've identified other family members who might be a resource that could possibly step up and help them and work with mom.
Yeah, it depends on the situation of family around you,
no family anywhere, then, as you know, to meeting be helpful. The child mediation.
Something obviously doing there, she was having but she's got a goofy attitude.
Oh, that's what we need. Family situation.
Could have been. Okay.
So you probably should start with that and then decide.
Parties involved.
Right.
And all that stuff kind of gets hashed out.
Right.
What about two?
Sure. Right. Make it expedited.
Well, every feel like a lot.
Yeah.
So, you would know what the directions are. Even if it's their parents who are totally accommodating. So to me, you missed.
Yeah, because you learn how to
There are a lot of decisions that you can make pretty quickly.
as much family as possible, so you could do an expedited.
Well, I mean,
Later, yes, when they're, before they're starting to get out, to see how the plan works.
But I more interesting that
That's probably
And either HHS or the court could refer that, because that would be.
It doesn't say, There's none.
There's none.
Well, but I mean, we have.
So who should just get I would have whatever service provider.
It's an issue should be addressed here, definitely the placement. Alternative.
the case worker, it's a visitation worker.
Number two issue addressed is where the children stay.
Yeah.
While parents are,
Well, dad's always going to take medication, other mom's
Yes.
inpatient, so.
are there family members, so yeah.
I'm not sure what cost it is.
What are your plans on going to families as far as the parents and children, phone contact, all those kinds of things.
Or if there's a
Transportation.
Same thing with mom. Is she allowed to have contact with the kids as she is, what does it look like, and supervise who's going to be there? Are the kids are pretty young, so is it what's appropriate to have that type of contact?
The time, you need to know that. You need to have a plan. And if there was the charges.
Where the most important person was there, and she was simply.
Take about 3 more minutes, 3 or 4.
Kind of just under her wing years ago. And just kind of watched over her, and she was the one who actually.
I think the last one did was the
had the most to say. I'll
So
be
you
sure
can
to
get
get
his
her.
family members in under
All
that stuff.
that sort of stuff.
They definitely need a permanency plan, you know, like the mom and dad are totally out of the picture. Actually,
And all the frequent areas in the outdoor conference, there's been lots of talks about across the nation. Family group talks to solutions that can help pay for some transportation.
That's right.
People in some charters, and state, plaintiffs, hotel rooms.
Considering the age of these children too, you have to make sure how they're going to be kept together as well as possible. And they've got some issues that probably define what they want to make bigger.
I don't know, does anybody disagree with anything that I said on this last one?
No.
But let's see, just out of curiosity, why is it your little thing? Oh, sure. Well, they were saying from the parents' home, so they're not saying from her president. Yeah. Well, that's
Good,
part of
you?
the FGC.
That's business. How are they gonna handle this with you guys losing your?
Well, don't you wrap up in the
Boys and
next
girls
minute
don't
or
get a contract?
so?
They're gonna have their own.
We don't know, they didn't talk to any of the directors that they're serving, and they're serving probably 50 to 60% of the state, because they have all the line counties, all the cities, counties.
I know.
They haven't out west, yeah, they haven't talked to any of them.
So we're worried about them trying to do their own thing.
Do they do that?
After the state,
Yeah, we don't say you don't get off. Yeah, sometimes you get a lot before that.
And then we service them.
we're relatively in this, and all of our records, because right now, we can't keep all of us transferred.
I don't think I have an office in our file.
Okay, let's have a little bit of debriefing, and I
Too
have,
bad.
before we leave at 12:15, I have one more slide that I want to make sure I show you all. So, I'd like to hear what your thoughts about, first one, Missy Sapa and her children. What kind of ADR, do you think is appropriate for ADR? If so, what kind of process, who would participate, what would the issues be, etc. Anybody, I'd like to hear a couple of thoughts. Yes.
We thought it was, that a family team meeting or child dependency mediation might be appropriate. But mom and any mom support network should be there, the foster family should be there. Caseworker, CASA, if they have one, like a mother, and any other pertinent support person.
Okay, so this group said family team meeting or a child dependency mediation, and mom, foster parents, mom support, CASA, guardian ad litem. Anybody have anything different? Yes, Deborah?
We talked about it, that we had more information and there was, additional family members or, it would be a larger group of family to support, and depending on what the issues were around mom not participating in our visits, that might be more appropriate for family group conferences, but we would have to explore.
So possibly more explore, so we do need more explanation. I also had a thought, this might just be mom and foster mom need to have a face-to-face. Maybe foster mom said something that offended mom, or and it was a misunderstanding. So again, that's where the prep time ahead of time, doing the conversations with mom separately, foster mom separately, kind of doing a little background check, and then doing that assessment. What would be the best intervention for this? Because it's according to the facts. She'd been doing this, mom had been doing this for 6 weeks, apparently successfully, but something happened to get it off track. So again, let's try to get in and out quickly. Thinking about that contact conversation we heard yesterday, that was uppermost in my mind. Who might refer this to the mediation or facilitation? Probably the caseworker, because they knew about it. Would the judge know about this? Probably not.
Unless it happened right around the time of
a reviewing. How about the second one? Clifton and Marcy Jensen and children, 2 children, Cliffy and Byron, removed because of drug use and neglect. Case was adjudicated in mid-August, and dad was put in jail. Mom case plan is for her to go into inpatient treatment for meth addiction. Anybody want to talk about how you assess this?
I don't know if I actually voiced, I didn't necessarily think that this was appropriate for, dispute resolution. I'm not quite sure what the issues are. If she's only recently been coordinated with patient treatment, it's probably making sure they're talking about permanency alternatives. But I don't know if there were some other opinions in there.
So one of the questions is, would an ADR even be appropriate, because it wasn't clear that there was an issue that needed to be done. There was other opinions in your group. What were some of the other opinions?
Well, the idea of eventual reunification always be, I think, would be, the mom would need to be finished treatment, and she would probably be the first one that would be available, even she would possibly consider reuniting with. So that would need to be a good length of time after treatment and recovery. So there would need to be ongoing progress meetings and visits to the word and all of those kinds of things, you know, and increase supervision. So I don't even know at what point, if dad's not there, well, or other support systems, so that would be.
So I think you brought up a key question, which is, early in the case, the reunification is likely to be the goal right now. Children were removed in June of '09. Case plan is for mom to do this, so mom reunification is likely to be the preliminary case plan. What piece is also missing? I think, Lynn, I heard your group say something about this, or another group.
Well, we thought about an expedited family group conference. Where's the family? Where's the support? Where are the kids going to stay while mom's at treatment?
So key questions.
Yeah.
If it's reunification, where are the kids going to stay? Who else is in the children's family circle? Do we know that? So whether to have a family group conference or an expedited family group conference to pull all of that together. I did use this fact pattern from an actual family group conference that was done, and the plan in that FGC was for the children to reunify with mom after successful drug treatment. The plan also included visits with dad's side of the family, so dad's side had been invited. On follow-up, mom and children were doing well. Mom had remarried. The children were still in contact with the dad's side of the family, and 3 years later the plan is still being followed. So that's an actual case where a family group conference was used. How about number three? Yeah.
Dan, that's one that I kind of want to point out. If at any point early in this case you did do an expedited family group conference, one of the nice things is the flexibility. Then you can make initial plans of where the child will stay, hopefully finding family, but then before, maybe it's a 6 or 9 month treatment, and so maybe a month or two before mom gets out of treatment, or maybe, you know, then you can have a full family group conference and bring even more people in for a more of a permanent plan.
So strategically using these family gatherings at different critical points of the case. Anyone get to number 3? Comments about 3? This group?
We looked at it, and it sounds like there's a lot of potential for a family group conference there. We didn't get the specifics worked out with who would be involved, but definitely the children, possibly even the oldest child would attend the family group conference.
So, and again for the record, since we're on videotape, this is where the dad had died. Mom committed suicide in June, and there were 4 children from 7 to age 14 who were in foster care. Foster parents might be interested in adopting, unsure, no family relations in Nebraska. There are family relations in 5 distant states. Children have some level of relationship with 3 of the 5 relatives, and so need for a permanency plan. And what Charlotte was saying, probably good for a family group conference. Not sure, didn't get to the point of who would come. Maybe the older child might attend. And again, for time purposes, again, this was where a family group conference was done. Coordinator found these 5 relatives in other states. All 5 sets traveled to Nebraska. There was a mutual agreement for the aunt in the southern state to take the children on a guardianship. They did. A year later, the children were unhappy. They rescheduled another family group conference. At that time, a different relative, everyone agreed. that that relative would take the guardianship of the children and went to live with this person in the eastern part of the United States. And I believe it resulted in a successful adoption. So again, that's where there was a couple of cases. It might have been, from the outset, you might think, well, foster parents here, they might be interested in adopting, stop there. Yet when you think about, I'm the kids, I have these aunts and uncles and grandparents out there, doesn't that make sense? Now the last slide I wanted to show you was how ATR processes impact the CFSR reviews in many places, but here's a couple key ones, which is how effective is the agency in preserving connections for children? We just talked about it, preserving connections for children. That's being measured and looked at. How effective is the agency involving parents and children in the kids planning process? Again, it's that continuum. The ATR processes help achieve these goals as well as some of the other timeliness and permanency goals. And that's something that our state system is working hard to track, to measure, to evaluate. And it's a fun and rewarding thing to be involved in. So, thank you.